Which you know what? I'm just remembering.
Yep.
Other things. How to properly introduce him to humans, including a 3-year-old, and cats.
Yep.
And bringing him home to where his home will be eventually, because we are going to move at the end of the summer. And then if there's a way to communicate no without the e-collar, because if we're just at home and he's not wearing it, he should be wearing it 24/7 right now.
Yep. We'll start with that one, because that one's the most kind of relevant with all of this stuff. So e-collar use, well, the way to tell, especially with a deaf dog, there's very little way to communicate boundaries without it, right? Like you have alternative ways to correct dogs. Like you can get into like squirt bottles and like pet correctors, there's like compressed air and stuff like that. There's a couple different types of corrections used, but this is gonna be the most efficient one, right? So my mentality as far as use of the e-collar, like long-term in the house, is initially, right, first month the dog is home, whatever, you know, in your guys' case, probably the next like 3 weeks or so. Pretty much anytime you're out with him, it should be on, right? Just because there's gonna be plenty of training opportunities that present themselves, plenty of boundaries that need to be set, right? There's plenty of little things in the house that need to be worked through, right? That you just have to be prepared in order to address, right? So yeah, for right now, just have it on as much as possible. Long term, right, once we've worked through those things, which if you're consistent over the next week about like addressing the issues at the window and like anything else in the house you may be seeing, you should see that stuff pretty much start to dissipate, you know, like pretty quickly. From there, I always use the e-collar long-term in 3 scenarios with my dogs. So if we're going off leash anywhere, if I'm having people come over the house, or if we're going anywhere public outside of the house, right? And I'm not contingent on needing it in those situations, but I always put it on in those situations just in case I run into any scenarios where my dogs blow me off, right? And because I always use it in those scenarios, I rarely run into problems that I actually need it, right? And then from there, you use it like a tool, right? If I start noticing that there's some weird new thing that's happening with my dog, they're getting into something or whatever that they don't usually do, I'll start re-implementing the e-collar for a couple of days just throughout the day so that I could address that thing consistently until it goes away, then I fade it out again in the house. So if that answers that question, obviously. As far as the introduction with people and stuff, we'll get into that in a minute here because I want to work on the bed stay a little bit, and that kind of will go hand in hand with that. So I'll take the leash from you. Oop, thank you. And you guys can go ahead and have a seat over there. I'm just gonna work them a little bit here. So I'm gonna run them through a couple bed stays. So at this stage, we really shouldn't need the food as much with him in the training process. We're kind of just gonna be giving the commands and just enforcing the commands. So obviously our cues we're giving, you know, our gestures towards the object or obviously into the position, downs, stuff like that. So for the bed one though, it's just a gesture towards the object. If he does it, fantastic. If he doesn't do it, I'm just gonna give a tap on the e-collar, then help him into position at that point. Same deal if he were to break command here, I would give a tap on the e-collar, then I would go back and help him back onto that bed.
So we've been doing training every meal with him and using his food. Should we start doing it without the food too?
Up to you. I mean, listen, like I'm not like, you can reward your dog. I have no problem with it. We just want to make sure he's still going to listen if we don't do it, you know? Because that's really where it kind of comes into handy.
Yeah.
So the meal training, I'm listening, it's fantastic enrichment for the dog. You know, it helps keep them sharp with commands and stuff. So you could do that as long as you want to do that for. I've got no problem with it, but you don't have to do it as much at this point.
He did a really good at the family dinner that we had.
What's that?
He did really good at
family
dinner we had.
Cool. How did you guys handle it?
We introduced them, like, instead of bringing them into the area that they wouldn't even consider as his spot.
Sure.
We just went like neutral, like outside.
Cool.
And just everyone kind of came and stood around and just kind of, you know, like we would give him command to sit or lay down and kind of calm down. And then once he was like calmer, he went to sniff people and pet him. They took turns giving him treats.
Yep.
And then he was pretty much.
Yeah, so you handled that pretty well, right? There's nothing terribly wrong about the way that you did it. There's a couple adjustments to make just to make some more clarity behind it. So you did the 100% correct thing by having him do something first before the interaction. So you said you made him sit and just like chill out for a minute, right? Anytime I'm gonna introduce my dog, especially a dog that's maybe a little bit fearful of people or dogs or whatever it is, to a potential trigger, my first step is, can I gain compliance around this thing, right? And you don't have to do it outside, you can do it in the house. I use my bed stay for this in the house with dogs, right? I'll put them on a bed stay, I'll bring the people in, and you know, I expect they're gonna be a little uncomfortable, a little apprehensive, stuff like that, and I just let them chill there. Just focus on this right now, right? right? I do that until it seems like they're totally settled, until they're totally chill, obviously. Bro, the itchiness. You're just a mess, dude. You're a mess. I do that until it's right there, gave a tap, helping him back on. There we go. I do that until they're totally chill, right? I want to see them completely settled on that bed, and I should see them in a state of mind where he's no longer really concerned about what they're doing, right? At that point, then I allow like just kind of neutral coexistence, right? So I release him, or in your case, like what you did, where you kind of had him just hang out and sniff and stuff like that, correct as well, right? Totally fine. But I try to have a little bit of separation as far as in that stage of things. I still instruct my guests, just kind of ignore him, right? Let him sniff you, let him check you out and stuff like that, and just let him kind of get comfortable and coexist and stuff like that. From there, I jump into the actual interaction stages of things, right? Which is, you know, if you want to pet him, you can, but I try to make a rule where I don't let people come into their space like this, and that can be really intrusive to dogs, right? If you want to pet him, you can kind of gesture him over, right? Or see if he wants to come over to you, and then if he doesn't, you have to respect that, right? And that just means he's not ready for it right now, and that's totally fine. The treat thing can go either way, right? My only issue with having guests give my dog treats is sometimes if you have a dog that's really fearful, if you kind of coax them in with the treat, they'll eat the treat and then suddenly it's like, whoa, like I just put myself in a really vulnerable position because I wanted that treat. And now that the treat is gone, I realize, holy shit, this person's right there and I'm uncomfortable with this. You know what I mean?
Vulnerability whiplash.
Yeah. So it can kind of like, it could kind of trick them almost a little bit, you know? So I tend to not do much with that, you know? Once I know my dog is cool with the people, if you want to have, I mean, at that point it's not a big deal, because then you're not kind of coaxing them into that position. They're already comfortable with you, and then you're just giving them a treat to make it even better, you know? So that's the only thing I would do different. Like I said, you handled it well, just a little bit more structure to those stages with things. And then just keep in mind that each one of those stages, whether it's the neutrality on the bed, the coexistence off of the bed, or the interaction stages of things, they're kind of prerequisites. So I have to see him in a totally calm state of mind on the bed in the house around the guest before I do the neutrality stage. And then I have to see him totally neutral and comfortable with the people while he's free before I move on to the interaction, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Right? And as long as you follow that, you really won't have any issues with it, you know?
Even just like walking through, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. The biggest mistake that people make is they just move through the steps too quickly. You know, and they try to start with the interaction side of things before they even gain any control over the dog around the person, and then suddenly they freak out, right? And then they have to resort to growling, barking, biting, things like that, you know? And then also understanding that at least for a little bit, until you've generalized this pretty well with new people, each time a new person comes to the house, you have to go through those steps, right? So let's say, whatever, your aunt comes over and we've done all those steps and he's really good with her, and then she comes back 2 weeks later, I still try to go through those steps again. You know what I mean? At least until I've really checked the box that like he's good with this person, right? And in some cases, like the second time, maybe each step takes you 3 minutes to accomplish. You know what I mean? It's not like it has to be like the whole time. Maybe it's like, okay, 2 minutes on the bed, all right, he's chill. 2 minutes of him just chilling, all right, he's chill. And then you jump right into the interaction, right? Kids, you were saying kids. Kids I'm much more slow about with things, right? I have a general principle with my dogs that I don't really see a need to have my dogs interacting with a lot of other children. Like, I don't know the context of this kid as far as if this is somebody that's just gonna be around all the time or, okay. So if it's somebody that you're gonna be living with, that's a completely different story. Obviously, we have to be able to get him comfortable with them. How old is the child?
He's 3.
3, okay, so really young, obviously. So in those stages of things, it really comes down to just mutual boundaries, right? So we have to obviously set boundaries with Connor, just kind of leaving him alone more or less sometimes, right? And like practicing impulse control around the kid. And then we have to have boundaries with the kid of, we're also gonna set boundaries where if he's just like laying down somewhere, or if he's on his bed or something like that, he has to be left alone, you know? And that's where it just comes down to management. Like obviously when you get into like really young kids, like they can comprehend that obviously, but sometimes you have to do some management of like, some people will be like, oh, well, I told them and they keep doing it. And it's like, well, they're 3 years old, right? Like you kind of have to play the game of, hey, like, let's not do this, right? So Just mutual boundaries with that. That's the important part is, you know, kids are weird to dogs, right, in the end of the day. Like they look different, they act different, they sound different, right? They move faster. So we have to be empathetic to that's gonna be weird to him initially. You gotta really just take your time letting him, you know, get acclimated to that. Right? And don't be surprised also. I think a lot of people get really concerned when dogs display discomfort, right? So like in Connor's case, like when he was first week he was here, something like that, you know, every now and then with like a new staff member, something like that, he let out a little growl if he was uncomfortable or this or that. And it's like, a lot of people look at that and they think it's just like the end of the world. Like, oh my God, he's being an aggressive monster. It's like, no, he's just saying he's uncomfortable with what's happening in that moment. And that's normal, right? That's dog communication. Now, I'm gonna be aware of it, right? If I start noticing he's growling because he's uncomfortable with something, I'm gonna ask myself, what boundaries do I need to set right now to help him feel more comfortable, right? But I'm not gonna be totally freaked out by it either, you know what I mean? And I'm almost gonna expect a little bit initially as I'm starting to establish those routines in the new place, right? So those are just things that I would keep in mind with that introduction process.
Yeah, it does make me anxious because I feel like, oh my God, is that gonna lead to him?
Of course, and you have to have that state of mind, right? You have to be aware it can turn into that for sure, right? But the growling in itself is not really a problem, right? It's almost a good thing that we could see that and we could be like, all right, what do I need to change right now? What am I doing incorrect that's making my dog feel uncomfortable right now? You know what I mean? You know?
Yeah. And then we have 2 cats that are indoor outdoor cats at that home. So they can kind of take care of themselves. They work with the dog before.
Yep.
So my gut would just be like to do the same thing and let the cats take care of themselves.
Kind of, right? Actually, I wouldn't do a command for that, just because that's like a more real life situation of like, we don't want to have to micromanage him with obedience like all the time. We need to teach what the expectation is, right? And cat stuff is pretty easy because I've talked about this before. It's not ridiculously emotionally charged. It's just this kind of like biological instinct they have of like, prey, I chase you, right? So that's really as simple as creating a boundary for the chasing. Right? So the second let's say I bring him into the house, I have him loose, he sees the cat, he's like, boom, I'm going for the cat. That's just I hit the button at a high level, right? And I set that boundary of chasing the cats is not fun, right? And I stay consistent about that and monitor the situation for a couple of days, right? Giving them, breaks, making sure the cats have somewhere they can go if they get uncomfortable, obviously, and making sure I have a place I can put him away from the cats if I'm not going to be diligent about supervising it, obviously. And then you'll notice after a couple of days, they'll be cool with it, right? My wife has a cat, and like when we first moved in with each other, it was the same deal. Like my dogs had never really been around cats before, and same deal. It's like, oh, I chased this thing, right? It's funny. My one dog actually chased him like up a tree one time the first time he met him. The same deal. I was like, I wasn't expecting it. Suddenly, cat's there, boom, right? So it was just a matter of, again, a couple days of consistently setting that boundary, and they're all, I mean, they don't even mind him now at this point, right? And same deal. He kind of sticks up for himself too. Like he's not too scared of them, and he's not shy to give them a good swat if they get too annoying, So.
We wonder about the one cat. He's a little more prone to mischief.
He used to swat at our old
Yeah.
It was like 140 pounds. And he got no fear.
Yeah. That's funny. Our cat is like that, man. He's a little bit of a dick. So he's got his claws too. Like he'll sit there and like antagonize. He doesn't really do it much anymore because he's getting older now. But he used to like sit on a couch and like anytime the dogs would even walk by, like they wouldn't even do anything. They wouldn't even pay him any mind. He's just like, right? Like. Yeah, it's like our one dog that got like so scared of him. Like it's funny. Like she'd be in the hallway, and if she knew the cat was like around the corner, she'd be like, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. But yeah, these long positions, like the long bed stays and the long down stays, these are really the best parts of these commands because they can help you like in a controlled way acclimate your dog to new things, right? Let's say I go to a new place, right? We're going to a new busy park or something like that. My dog's never been there and I think they might be a little overwhelmed by everything going on. I could just go park myself somewhere, put them into a down and just let them take it all in, in a controlled way, right? And, they're still aware of everything going on, but it's like we're splitting their brain a little bit and telling them like 50% of your brain needs to stay focused on this task at hand so that instead of having 100% of your brain freak out about everything going on, you only have half of it, right? So they can take it in a little bit more controlled, right? And then obviously I make sure in those settings, my level is motivating enough where then if they're too distracted by that, I can give a correction that's motivating enough to get them to refocus back in. Because that's really where the magic happens with it, is when they realize I'm still relevant, like as the owner. Like you have to still pay attention to me. You gotta have one ear turned to me still with this.
Yeah, it reminds me of like at a certain point when you're a kid, you feel like your mom can see you.
Sure.
Like, how does she do that?
100%, right? And it helps influence your behavior, right? Where if you were free to just like figure all that stuff out with absolutely no direction or consequence, you know, it's like you're gonna get yourself into more trouble, right? Like you're not like mature and like mentally stable enough to be able to handle that kind of stuff. And dogs are the same way, right? They're kind of like children in that capacity.
David, would you mind talking about introductions to other dogs too?
Sure. Do you have any particular dogs that you're thinking about introducing him to?
Yeah, my cousin lives in the neighborhood and she has 2 dogs. One is the same size as him and one is like a 6-month-old puppy, or 4-month maybe.
Yep.
Mix. And I thought they might enjoy playing together.
Sure.
So.
Are those other 2 dogs pretty social?
Yeah.
Cool.
The one that's a little older, and a little bit his size. Is a black-coated retriever.
Yep.
And then I don't know what Opie is. He's a mix.
He's a mix.
Yeah, so dog introductions is actually pretty simple, and especially given that he really didn't have that many issues with other dogs, you know, like the only time I noticed anything weird with him with another dog is there was another intact male we had here, and like they were a little standoffish towards each other, but that's kind of normal, you know, when you have 2 intact males, obviously. But again, it wasn't even really a problem. It's just they kind of like grumble at each other and stuff like that, and you know. No, it wasn't like I'm trying to attack you or anything. It's just like we're just kind of like playing tough guy macho thing back and forth with each other, you know. But
we're actually getting him here tomorrow.
Great. Oh, cool. Good. Yeah. So I'm not super concerned about him with other dogs. And honestly, the process of introducing them, it's similar to the process of introducing to people, but I actually move through the stages quicker, right? So I have like an initial control, you know, side of things, same deal, right? So I want to make sure I could get him to focus on me in the presence of this other dog, right? Just so I know, again, I have one ear turned to me so that if there are any problems, I could de-escalate him pretty quickly, obviously, right? From there, I just kind of let them do their thing, right? Like I put them together and I don't do anything to mess with it. I'm not petting them. I'm not having them on a leash pulling up to the other dogs. I just drop my leash, let them go, let them sniff and figure each other out and stuff, and I just monitor it, you know? And I supervise and I just make sure that they kind of do their thing, you know? Dogs communicate in such a different way than people do, obviously, right? Like they understand each other more deeply than we understand them, right? So I can allow that stuff to kind of play out a little bit better and know that they probably know what they're doing with things, you know? So that would really be it. The only thing I would recommend is maybe do it with one of the dogs at a time, you know? Let him develop a relationship with like one of the dogs, right? Let that go well, then do it with the other dog, then you could do it together. And then you just get into, you know, when it comes to socializing my dogs with dogs that don't live in the same household, I try to not have it be for crazy long periods of time, right? So a lot of people want to do that, like, oh, we're having a barbecue and everybody's bringing the dogs over, or we're having a party and everybody's bringing the dogs over. I'm not into that. I think that's recipe for disaster. 9 out of 10 times when people do that stuff frequently, it always at some point results in a dog fight. You know, just because like any number of things can happen. Somebody drops a table scrap on the ground after 5 hours of the dogs being together, and you know he's getting cranky because like he's just over it, and like suddenly boom, like dog fight breaks out. That doesn't mean they're bad dogs. It just means that we didn't set up that scenario properly for them. We expected too much out of them, and that, you know. So I usually recommend, at least for a while, right, just small play dates, right, 45 minutes to an hour, right. Let them have their fun, then just end it on a good note, you know, and let them, you know, develop their relationship that way. He's like, okay. So now you can praise them or whatever if you want to. Cool. All right, I think that was good. So a couple big takeaways here. One, you probably need to be working much higher on your e-collar for stuff, right? If you're noticing he's blowing you off, if you're noticing he's getting too distracted by things, as long as you know you're being clear with things, which your timing looked pretty good with everything, your issue is probably a motivation issue, right? Second thing, the introduction to people and stuff, just following those 3 steps of control first, coexistence without people messing with him, then actual interaction will be kind of the sealed deal on that. And then I want to see you guys get your crate stuff looking better, and then the out-of-sight bed stays and stuff looking better.
Yeah, great.
You guys have any questions on that?
This is probably dumb, but like,
There's no dumb questions.
and I know I've read your philosophy and obviously
Sure.
you brought him here. It's not harmful for him to use the e-collar, right? In the long term.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, listen, you could get into reading all sorts of conflicting information here and there and this and that, right? Like, my dogs love me, right? Like, I use e-collars with them, right? But the e-collar allows me to do so many more things with them that I would never be able to do if I didn't have it. You know what I mean? So they're living a better, more fulfilled life because of that. Also, right, you get into in nature, right? There's consequences, right? If dogs are living out in the wild, animals out in the wild, they communicate with each other through consequence. They're not out there handing out cookies and giving each other rewards and stuff like that for things, right? And listen, yeah, we're more civilized than whatever, a pack of bears or something, you know what I mean? So we could get away with adding some more fun into it and doing things like that and stuff, but like this stuff is normal to them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like, forget an e-collar. Like you could say, well, we're not going to use an e-collar, but we still have to be able to give them a consequence in some way, or else we have to just manage them forever, right? You get into the opposite philosophy of things, right? And you get into like kind of force-free training and stuff like that, which listen, if people want to do that, I have no problem with that. If they're happy with the results that it gives them, right? It's going to train the dog still. But the problem is there's a lot more managing and just avoiding problems, which just causes you to restrict your dog's life more. You know what I mean? And that's my problem with that kind of stuff. And that's why I choose to do this, is because I want to do more things with them. I want to incorporate them into more parts of my life.
Yeah.
So.